Testing, testing. Couldn't hear these upstairs. Yeah.
Testing. This is working too. Good.
Yeah, you just gotta push the picture and push the
Yeah.
button.
Does that clock up there lose time over time? It gets slower every time. Mine is too. If mine ran like that, I'd be late to everything. My faculty get upset to come into my office and they think they're late all the time. Yeah, mine does too. But we'll wait for the 3. I guess we have a quorum. We could start with. Good evening. Did you see anybody else down there by chance? Pretty slick little. Do you usually do that? This whole thing? I've never noticed it before.
That's just the cap.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Kind of have to.
All right. Welcome everyone to the City Council study session of Monday, June 24th, 2019. My firstborn's birthday. So tonight we have 2 agenda items on the study session. The first being the residential garbage and recycling service delivery, and Public Works Director Maria Deandra is here to present to discuss this. So go ahead, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. So I do have just a couple of slides. We're focused tonight. We did meet with you previously in a study session on April 22nd, and we're given direction from City Council to explore further and seek more input, specifically by forming a subcommittee of some volunteers from some of our existing boards and commissions. So I've also done some outreach based on the feedback from council to other communities as well, specifically Lakewood, and who's currently in the process of soliciting RF proposals, as well as Highlands Ranch, which is unincorporated technically, but they do provide an opt-in service for their community. So I'll explain some of those details as we go further along. So at the April 22nd, as I mentioned, we were given direction from council to move forward, and tonight what we'll be discussing specifically is that public communication process. So how can we go forward and solicit input from the community as to whether this is a good decision or not, to move essentially from our open collection system to an organized collection system. is really the question at hand. And then if so, what does that system look like? So as I mentioned, I went with Waste Management. They reached out to me and talked about their current service within the city. They estimate that they service about 40% of our customers, of our households right now. So we do have 4 companies that are licensed. If you recall, at the April 22nd, we had 3. We have since gotten one additional one to sign up or become licensed through the city. So then the assumption is that the other 3 are servicing some other portion, the other 60% of those accounts within the city. So not a whole lot of providers. And I think that speaks to Waste Management's presence within the community. As I mentioned, I did contact Highlands Ranch. Their program is not an opt-out, but an opt-in, meaning that they've set up a contract with, I believe it's Pro Disposal, whereas then if you want to, right now it's very similar to us, if you want to reach out to a particular company, you can do so. And they have to be licensed through Douglas County because Highlands Ranch is not a city. And absent that, then you can opt into their program, which has a set dollar amount. It does provide recycling as a part of that. And it's relatively inexpensive. It's $14.75 per month, which I thought was a very good price in relation to some of the prices that we've been hearing from folks who within Englewood. She could not tell me, the lady from Highlands Ranch, how many people have taken advantage of that. So how many people does Pro Disposal have signed up? I did reach out to Pro Disposal, and they're supposed to be trying to figure out roughly, I said just roughly, out of all the people in Highlands Ranch, how many homes are you servicing? And they have not gotten back to me, but I'm trying to get that information. But it isn't, like every single house, because many of those subdivisions or smaller areas within Highlands Ranch contract with one company, perhaps, to do their collection. So it is sort of hit or miss depending on how your particular HOA within Highlands Ranch opts to do garbage service. And then, as I mentioned also, Lakewood has a request for proposal out right now for organized service within the entire city of Englewood, or within Lakewood. I did speak to their coordinator over there and got some more information, and I think it's set up, I've read through it, it's set up very well. They're looking at various options so that they're not focused on one particular service, but they've gotten really a menu almost of different cost options to consider. And their plan, I believe their proposals come back either this week or next week, and then they plan to take those to a study session with their city council in mid-July. So that's kind of their plan. So since the April 22nd study session, we also formed a subcommittee made up of representatives from ETAC, the Budget Advisory Committee, Keep Englewood Beautiful, and CASE. And Neil Sarno with ETAC is here tonight, as well as Jeff Frazier with CASE. So they're, and Bob Stevenson. Thank you for coming. So we did get some great feedback from the subcommittee, talking specifically about the collection parameters, how we might form or structure an opt-out program if we were to move forward, and then just overall timing on how quickly we would want to make this decision with City Council. So as we talked through with the group, their intent is really to move forward with a single hauler. The subcommittee felt that Englewood was too small with 37,000 households to really warrant having 2 providers. That was also the feeling from the waste management representative, is that, with that number of accounts, which is probably anywhere between probably 10 and 11,000 households, which is based on number of water meters, is that it probably wouldn't make, now they would certainly bid on it, but it wouldn't make as much economic sense for the city or the citizens if we were to go with more than one hauler. This would involve weekly garbage collection as well as bi-weekly recycling. That's kind of the base service. The hauler would provide containers so that they are uniform and can be picked up with that automatic arm if that was an option. And this was an interesting aspect. So we've talked a lot about alley collection and the need to do that. And obviously there's still a very strong interest in that, but there's also an equal number of people potentially who have their collection out on the street. They either choose not to put it on out from the alley, or they don't have access from the alley. And so the idea is that we would require both alley and street collection from the provider. So people wouldn't have to say, or collectively say as a block, like, we're gonna be in the alley. You could just do either, and the truck would have to circle the block to pick up either in the alley or on the street side. Establishing levels of service with penalties. So let's say we establish X number of missed pickups per month. If they exceeded that, then we would have a financial penalty that would come back to the organization as a result of that. So it would hit them essentially in the pocketbook if they missed those levels of service. And they would be required, along with us, to make sure that they're providing that data so that we can accurately measure that. Composting would be available only as an extra cost, so people could opt into that and get a third container. We would have some sort of program for large item pickups. That's yet to be determined, as well as the potential for providing electronic waste and hazardous waste collection at your home. So that was another area of interest. Again, probably either wrapped into the base service somehow, and maybe once per month people could set that out at the curb, potentially large items too. We could maybe do it all in the same day.
Director Deandra,
yeah.
would you like us to hold on questions or ask them as we go?
Please, we can take them as we go.
Okay, Councilmember Wink.
Thank you. The composting costs, do we have any kind of estimate as a percentage of the monthly costs that might total?
Typically, the other communities that we surveyed who offer it as an optional cost, it was anywhere from about $9 to $11 per month additional. So the question, what we're saying is, if it's, you know, that rather than requiring that of everybody, that
Sure.
people would have to opt in and then pay an extra amount in order to have composting.
I understand that. I just wanted to know how expensive it
Oh,
might
okay.
be, just
Yep.
relative to what they're already paying. Is
Yeah.
it, you know,
Probably another third
1/10,
then.
Approximately
Yeah.
that. Okay, thank you.
And then we did talk quite a bit about the opt-out program too. So while that's definitely of interest, is to have people allowed to basically choose their own service. The idea would be is that all residents would be required to participate for that first year, to at least give it a try. And if they don't, then afterwards they could go out to a different service, and then they would just show us proof that they do have garbage service. The idea being too is that would streamline and probably give us the most cost-efficient service from the proposal standpoint, is that the providers would know exactly how many houses they're picking up at every single house, and they're not jumping over those. So that was a direction from the subcommittee. Our proposed strategy going forward was to kind of use that as that base parameter, and now go out to the community and say, what do you think of that? So gather feedback. Do you like the idea of both alley and curbside pickup? Because that's going to cost more. You know, if we have people circling the block, or the trucks circling the block, it is going to cost more. And be less efficient, which was one of the things and parameters that we talked about in doing this. We would also, and I'll go into the public outreach effort in more detail here in a minute. We were also going to reach out to the other waste haulers and offer them the opportunity to meet with staff the same way that Waste Management did. And just talk about, you know, obviously they're the ones servicing our citizens. Are there any other ideas that they might have for cost effectiveness, how we might roll this out to get their opinion? Then we would also look at what kind of administrative needs and how would we communicate this on an ongoing basis. So somebody would need to be in charge of the overall program, and those costs would need to be incorporated. We would also need to put this onto the utility bill, so making sure that we understand what that process is and how people would be charged for service. And then we would develop a formal request for proposals and actually put that out on the street, get those proposals back before we would come to City Council with recommendations. So we would use the feedback from the community to actually inform the request for proposals, lay out different options for consideration. And then, as the subcommittee mentioned, that way we're dealing with real numbers. So it's not just, oh, I think it's going to be less, this is the cost that we're going to pay, and does that make sense for the City of Englewood?
Member Wink, I wonder if we can let her get through the whole thing and then come back. Can you just make a note of it? Because I'm worried that I'm looking at the clock already, and let's just gather them all.
2 more
So I'll let you
slides and
go
I'll
through
be
the
done.
slides and then hold your questions. Thanks.
So the idea is just to use a variety of efforts to engage the community, putting information on our website, having booths or a table at different community events, planning 3 neighborhood meetings, as well as sending out an online survey that people could take so that we could, again, solicit their input on what would a system really look like, and what would they think about that. The request for proposal, we would probably use Lakewoods as a great basis, and again, use that based on community and waste hauler input to kind of form those elements of the options that we would consider. So this is kind of our timeline that we're talking about, is starting, if we were to get direction from you to move forward, we would start that public outreach campaign in late July. We give us a little time to develop some materials. And probably that initial effort is a postcard informing people of the online survey, encouraging them to do that, and then also notifying them of these 3 public meetings. We would probably have to do another mailing, so I'm looking at early August, early September, and early October to have public meetings. Now in the summer, we're probably going to get some limited input, so we want to have various methods of how we reach out to people. And then those different community events as they come up, we would be there as well. The intent would be is by the end of September, we're issuing the RFP and giving them waste haulers about a month to respond, which is very typical. And then we would use the time in November to evaluate those, probably have a study session with council so that we could make a decision, an actual action by the city council in early December, probably that first meeting. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Wink, I'll let you start.
So, with my limited knowledge as a citizen, it doesn't seem to me that it might be very difficult to roll into our current method of collecting our utility bill, that it would be too difficult or add a lot of challenge to add that. Do you know yet, or have you researched when you were looking through Lakewood, for example, just what it would take to, what does that look like for our staff?
Certainly. I think the element of adding it to the bill is the easy part.
Yeah, okay.
And so it's more about the communication. So if you get a
Right.
quarterly bill right now for roughly a
Right.
certain dollar amount, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, now I've got 3 months of garbage on there. And as much as we've reached out to people, it still might come as a shock. So we've got to be able to
The
communicate
communication
that.
plan.
Yeah, so I think the system is able to do it.
Yeah,
It's just
okay,
then a
good.
question, and because it's a flat amount per
Right.
household per month, it's pretty
That
easy.
should be almost easier for
Yeah.
our staff.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions, council members? Councilmember Berentine?
Which are the companies that are licensed with us right now?
Waste Connections, Waste Management. I believe, I don't have the list in front of me, I believe it's Pro Disposal, and then there was another one. Yeah, did it start with American?
Is it American Eagle? I'm not American Eagle.
I'm sorry, I forget the fourth one. I can follow up with you with the list,
Okay.
though.
American and Pro Disposal are both owned by Waste Connections, so we
Okay.
actually only have 2 companies in the community that starts to become somewhat of a problem in creating a monopoly. And it didn't take actually too much research to go on there and understand how this is going nationwide and where they're owning the landfills. And once that kind of ends up happening, we don't end up having too much opportunity if they don't do good service, if they don't, I mean, Waste Connections alone on their website is very clear that customer service is third to them. And it's a very interesting read. I would suggest all of you do that. I am a little concerned also about waste management being brought to the table already so early in the process to be part of a group when we're going to be putting out an RFP. So I believe that Waste Connections, Waste Management, and Republic are actually the three bigger ones. I don't know if we have any lingering independents that are still out there that would be able to even bid this. So as part of this process, I'd even like to know if what kind of options we really do have, considering they seem to be gobbling each other up in this process. So Pro Disposal went under, they're already telling everybody it's going to be $17. So I'm not even sure they're going to honor the commitment for people that bought in a year or 2 year contract, because there's some confusion on the letter. So if we could get some clarification on exactly what the options are between these, I guess, three companies that actually exist. And that's funny because we were always hearing there's 16 trucks going up. Apparently there weren't ever that many companies to begin with. It looks like there were about 5 or 6, and they've been bought up within the last 6 months between a couple of companies here. So if we could get that information, and if you could let me know why we would have gone this far with Waste Management already.
Certainly.
And not invited the other people to the table, because I think that presents a conflict.
Well, I don't think it does. So Waste Management attended the April 22nd meeting with City Council, and they reached out to staff and requested a meeting. So we didn't solicit them. And as I mentioned in my presentation, our intent is to reach out via email or letter to each of the companies, even the ones that aren't licensed, just to get because I don't know if Republic Services is, but they're obviously a big player within the metro area. So we would send them a letter as well as a potential bidder, if you will, to have that pre-meeting before we go into the RFP process. And again, the intent of that is to solicit information and feedback from the people who do it every day.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that question too. Member Cuesta.
Pardon me, thank you, Mayor. To start, I do appreciate getting so many citizen groups involved. I think that goes a long way, and the more we can hear directly from citizens and folks on these groups, it's very helpful. So thank you for including that. I might be getting a little further down the road here. I'm curious how this would look procedurally. I do like the opt-out approach. Now, I certainly see what you guys are shooting for there, where if we can just present there's a flat number of households, you're guaranteed this many pickups a week, a month, whatever, with those who submit an RFP. But if we were to go with everybody has to partake in the program for the first year, how many existing licensees are there now, licensed haulers in the city?
4.
So assuming one of them wins, you have one of them win, the other 3, we would cancel their licenses and they would no longer be authorized to pick up within the city?
Yes, so we'd have to probably do some amendment to the code to say how we're changing the service within the city. So that would be a part of that action. I think the other question that we talked a little bit with the subcommittee is how does that affect current service contracts?
Sure.
Like you might have
bet.
individually with a company. Is there a phase-out timeline before we implement the new service? I think that's some of the things we've got to discuss more and get more detail about.
Understood. And that was a secondary component as well, is how do we make citizens aware? How do they know that all of a sudden their trash service is discontinued, et cetera, et cetera? Okay, that may cover it for now. That does.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Sierra.
I guess my first question is, are we looking to limit the number of opt-out providers or licensed providers if we were to move forward with a contract with a single hauler?
No, so we would still, let's say we went through that, if we structured it this way, where everybody had to participate for the first year. The intent would be is that if you wanted to go to a different company after that first year, you would be allowed to do that, and you could select from anybody you wanted. We still might have them be licensed at that point, so we probably still have that requirement, but you could choose anybody you wanted at that
Okay.
point.
I think that may be one of the questions that we would want to ask the citizens, because it may defeat the purpose of going to a single hauler if we're going to have the same number of trucks going down the alleys.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads to my second question. Do we know the type of questions that we're going to be asking of citizens when we reach out to them?
Not at this time. I think, we'll certainly structure it as kind of this is the base service, and then how do you feel, I think some of the questions might be, how do you feel about, what are those top 3 things if we were to go to organized collection that would be most important to you? Is it alley collection? Is it cost? Is it some other factor? And then, you know, if we were to provide composting service, how likely might you be to participate in that?
Okay. I think definitely asking whether alley or street pickup would be preferable, just getting an understanding of how many people are still using their alleys for trash pickup. And I guess third, more of a comment, I was reading that Carbondale near Aspen also went to a single hauler, and they're going to be starting up September 30th. So they were able to get their monthly bill down from $25 average down to about $15 per month. So
That's great.
knowing that a mountain community where there's less options usually bodes well for us moving forward with something like this. Price is definitely one of the considerations. So thank you for the work.
Councilmember Questa, did you?
Yeah, I did have one more, and it was kind of the follow-up, and Councilmember Sierra kind of started walking down that road. So everybody opts in for the first year, and all these licensees have been discontinued. We're down to a single licensee to haul within the city. And then the year completes, and everybody can opt back out. To me, then all these haulers, they're going to have to turn the spigot back on. They've got to come back in and get licensed. People opt out, and there might not even be companies to opt out into. That there's 16 people that opt out, and it's not even worth a hauler to go get a license, et cetera. So to me, it might even, that first year must opt in could create almost just a forced opt-in just down the road, because it's just not worth the trouble at a certain point. Again, I actually really like the idea of single hauler, but I really like the idea of single hauler with that opt-in or that opt-out built into it. So that's what I keep coming back to, but I agree. This is a very good conversation, and I'll be honest, mine's $30 a month now, I think, so $15 sounds great, you know, if I'm getting the same service, just at a basic economic level. Thank you.
Just a comment about the opt-out. Another way we could possibly structure it is to list that as one of the options within the proposal. So if we were to put together a program where people could opt out immediately, what would the cost look like in that case? And make an assumption of 5% of the people would opt out, or maybe it's higher, I don't know. So maybe I'm going to give that some thought and talk to the providers about, have they done this before? What do they see? Is that a higher risk level, which translates then into higher costs for everyone? And maybe that will help drive our decision to some extent.
Mayor Pro Tem, welcome.
Thank you. So my question is the city going to pursue some sort of long-term agreement with whoever gets the contract? Because what happened when Waste Management got the contract years ago, within 6 months, they started raising prices exponentially because now there's a monopoly.
Sure.
And then we have penalized the entire city because we've driven everybody else out of business.
Yeah, and I think the counteract to that would be is that the price would be set within the contract for those first 5 years. So we would establish a 5-year contract because they need that in order to provide those containers, the trash containers. And so in my experience with other communities, we set it up so that they can have not an automatic increase, but that it's based on the CPI of the Denver metro area. So there is an acknowledgement that prices are going up, but it's limited to that rate within the metro area. And so it's then at the end of the 5 years, we can rebid it, and then they can't jack it up significantly because they're bidding again against other parcel or property owners. Providers.
Will that be a problem with Tabor? I mean, entering into long-term agreements?
Go ahead, City Attorney. My understanding is we make 5-year agreements and then they're renewed every year, and so you can always get out of them, but go ahead.
Yeah, it's the way we write it to make sure they're structured so there's an out clause.
We've done this a number of times for things. I have a question too. So first of all, at Colorado Municipal League last week, the mayor had a morning meeting where we talked about issues going on in all of our cities, and they were from all over the state. It was amazing how many people are going to single trash haulers and the conversations around it. There were those who had gone to it, and then after 4 or 5 years, they go out to bid again because that was the agreement, and they got a lower bid, and then the people in the city were mad because they didn't want to change. So it was an interesting it was an interesting conversation. No one regretted doing it, but some had opt-in, some had opt-out. And I made a list of cities I could give to you that have just done this or about to do this.
Very
But
helpful. That
Yeah,
would be helpful.
I'll
Thank you.
get that to you. And trying all different kinds of things with this in different community processes to get feedback. But with Lakewood, do they have alleys do they have an alley and street service, do you know, or?
I know they have alleys. I don't think it's specifically stated that where the trucks were supposed to pick up within the document.
The reason why I ask, and I think you already know this, but we have some places that only could be serviced from an alley.
Yes.
And we have others that can only be serviced from a street.
Yeah.
So we've got to have some company that's flexible. And the monopoly that's going on, it looks like there's 2 to 3 big companies now. And so even though they've gobbled up these little ones are still coming, and like Pro Disposal and others are coming through neighborhoods. And they usually bring 2 trucks, one for recycling and one for not. So if you have 5 going on, you end up with 10 up and down your street if they're. So there are a number of them happening, and that's one of the reasons why many of the other cities have gone with it, particularly rural areas where everything is alleys and it's tearing up, and they don't have the infrastructure to redo those either. I appreciate all the work that you've done on this. It would seem to me that our different forms of communication that we've been using in the past would be a great start. I wonder if this would be a great way to, and this would have to do with our communication office, to start a new communication platform of some sort, like Bang the Table or some of the things we heard about, because this is a big issue. And it would seem like people would hear about it pretty fast, because people get upset about trash and they get upset about dogs, but I don't want to leave anybody out of the conversation to not know that this could be coming, or that their input's really important. So I think we ought to consider some communication methods we haven't used before on this as well.
Certainly.
So maybe there's some folks in the communication department that could come up with those. Other comments? Mayor Pro Tem?
So if we're thinking about communication methods, it could go out with the utility bill. That goes out every month, and I think send it out and see what happens, because everybody will then be notified at the same time.
Great idea.
Yeah, some people pay directly, so they don't even look at them, but I think those who do would be great mode. Councilmember Martinez.
Just a comment. I am really excited that we're talking about this, and thank you so much for all your work on it. And thanks to the subcommittee folks who have put so much time and energy and effort around thinking through these questions, and I'm sure there will be lots more conversations to come. So looking forward to see where it goes and what we learn.
So tonight you wanted to get from us a nod to keep working further on this?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to do a round robin, and we'll start with Member Sierra. Want to keep moving on this? Yes. Member Barentine?
Yes, if you could just answer those 2 questions as well, because it's looking like we only have 3 companies available, so that would change some of the method we might use.
Yeah. And I think there are some independent folks who would like to get in here, but they aren't licensed, and so I really appreciate that you're reaching out to them as well. Most of them have been gobbled up, and a lot of the landfill, as we know, is owned by one in particular, so everyone has to go through them anyway, so it gets cheaper when you go with them, which is what the mayors were talking about last week. I'm for it. Keep moving forward on it. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes.
Member Wing?
Yes, thank you.
I'm in support, and thanks again to the citizens who worked on this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Member Martinez?
Heck yes, I'm very supportive.
Yeah. Yeah, and Member Cuesta, thank you for reminding us of that. Thank you for all of you that are here tonight that came. Go back to your groups and tell them thank you for the work you've been doing. This is really great. It's got to be a citizen-informed initiative to do this, so thank you. Our second item is proposed IGA with the Arapahoe County Office of Emergency Management, and Interim City Manager Dorothy Hargrove is here to present to discuss this proposed IGA. Along with
Let me introduce Nathan Fogg from the Office of Emergency Management in Arapahoe County. He's here to help with the brief presentation and to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
And he may not mention it, but his voice is suffering from a summer cold. So,
me too.
you know, he's very kind to come tonight. As your packet in front of you states what you have is a proposed IGA with the Arapahoe County Office of Emergency Management to provide emergency management services to the City of Englewood. We had met with City Council on April 8th of this year, and our direction was to start talking to Arapahoe County to see what services they might be able to provide and what some sort of an arrangement might look like. We met fairly quickly thereafter. We've been talking with staff in Arapahoe County and our staff. We've gotten the attorneys involved, which hasn't slowed things down very much at all. And we have in front of you what I think is a pretty good skeleton of what an agreement would look like if we move forward. The scope of services to be provided by Arapahoe County, as well as the obligations, expectations of the city, are pretty clearly delineated in this document. Clearly, City Council and the citizens of this community want emergency management services, and they want to be able to prevent, prepare for, respond, mitigate, and recover from any emergencies that may occur. Arapahoe County is currently required to assist municipalities in their jurisdiction in the event of a disaster, but absent that, they are not required or have the resources to help us train, prevent, or to analyze the services afterwards, lessons learned. I would like to ask Nate at this point to sort of jump in with some of the services that his office would be able to provide to the City of Englewood.
Sure. So, forgive my voice. Dorothy mentioned prepare, prevent, respond to, recover from. I'm going to add improve. That's a process that I'm pretty adamant about. Just a brief overview of our office. In the late 80s, that function was moved from the chair of the county commissioners to the sheriff's office. Since then, it's grown to where it's at now, the point where I oversee that office. Myself as the director, I have a deputy director and 4 staff, all emergency management specialists. I'm certified emergency manager, the deputy director is certified, and one of our specialists is certified. We do a variety of functions, and all of them are driven by planning. So first and foremost, we have a strategic plan and a training and exercise plan. Each one of those are valid for 3 years and describes how we're going to move forward on a variety of different things. After that comes the things that we're required to do by law. So for us, that's the emergency operations plan. Every county is required by the state to have an emergency operations plan on file. When we start digging into the processes, we learn there's a ton of other things that need to inform that plan. So that goes back to then the hazard mitigation plan. So those 2 things in conjunction with the continuity of operations kind of are the top 3 things that are going to describe how government functions in these events. So continuity is what happens when we've not done our job and saved the world, so to speak, right? How do we continue to do our functions because we can't ever stop being the government? Inside of that, there are other plans: resource mobilization, public alert and warning, evacuation, recovery, and a variety of different pre-plans that we have in place. Our office staffs an EOC. At the county, we have special operations teams that we run, including winter operations, wildland fire, life track, which is a radio frequency program we use for folks who wander. Their Englewood residents on that program now. We have unmanned aircraft that we use, an incident management team. Myself and several other folks are hazmat technicians. We represent the county on a variety of boards across the metro region and the state. GIS, the list goes on and on. We require a lot of things in order to make those our system work. Events that we've done recently: 2012 wildfires. We supported Douglas and El Paso counties there. 2013 floods was the first presidential declaration of a disaster in this county. 2014, we did a week-long, every municipality in town in the county came to us, and we did a week-long exercise with FEMA. 2015, again with floods, another declaration. 2016 multiple apartment fires where we had income-capped seniors that were displaced forever. We had a blizzard that year. 2018, we saw more storms, wildland fires, apartment fires than this year so far. Just a big blizzard. So that's kind of some of our experiences. To prepare, we go through, I talked about the planning process. That's crucial for us. This discussion that we're having now has been on kind of my long-range planning concept for a couple of years now, where particularly the west side is largely been uncovered by a dedicated emergency management program, and that's something that I've identified as a weakness for a while. And so I'm excited to see Englewood taking steps to try and mitigate that on the west side. I think you're heading down the right road. Prevention, we talked about that a little bit. That's largely considered an anti-terrorism perspective. We have some things that we can deal with in that realm. I won't go into them very deeply here. But it also has to do with things like the rail that goes through here, dealing with technological hazards, how to avoid spills, what's on those rails, that sort of thing. Response is something I want to be real clear on. I was a cop for 19 years. I retired as 18 years, retired as a lieutenant from the sheriff's office to take this job. And emergency management is not a 911 function. If you call 911, you're never going to get an emergency manager. You're going to get the EMS, the law enforcement, or firefighters. So that's not us. We don't do those functions. I kind of tease that when all of those guys are out of options, that's when they call us. So massive escalating incidents or atypical incidents where resources are drained, and resources are likely to be drained, lots of external help is needed, that's where we come in. So not 911, but work very closely with 911. And then bring atypical responders, road and bridge, public works folks, stormwater folks, wastewater folks, engineers, dam safety engineers. We had an event earlier this year, I forgot about that, with a potential dam failure that was going to run through from Jeffco into Columbine Valley and Littleton. So those kinds of atypical events where you could call 911, but you can't do much about it. That's kind of us. The recovery component, OEM generally will transition an event from a response coordinating cycle into the short-term recovery, and then very quickly from there it needs to transition back to a typical government function of medium to long-term recovery. And if you look at Boulder and Lyons, maybe you saw that at CML, where they're still dealing with long-term recovery issues. And then the improvement process. One of the things that I'm sure you're all familiar with is just a process improvement cycle. There's a million different names that you could throw at it, but essentially it's you run an event based on your training and everything else. You train for it ahead of time, you run it, evaluate openly and honestly what happened, what worked, what didn't, assign those tasks out on the improvement process with a due date, and then that's open and published. So that AAR, after action review improvement process, is something that we do on all of our activations. So I add that into the things that we kind of mentioned at the beginning. So kind of the last two things that I'll say is that the level of effort that's going to be required out of this, I think it's important to mention that we bring a lot of experience to this, and to help get the city to where I understand you'll want it to be is not a 1 year, we're going to come in for 1 year and help you write a few plans, like a contractor. Here, put it on your desk and we're gone, and it collects dust and it never helps you. I don't think that's beneficial for the county. It's not beneficial for my office. So I don't want to see, I think the level of effort is too great on my part to come in and try and help organize that effort to have it stopped in a year and turned over to a new person, a new program, a new director, whatever that looks like, so that you kind of got these fits and starts and you're never really catching traction, your flywheel's not spinning, So something to think about there. And then the last bit, I'll just echo what Dorothy said, is that the IGA, I think, requires a little bit more back and forth between the attorneys. But I don't see anything right now that is an obstacle that would impede this from my perspective of moving forward.
Thank you. So Nate touched on the reasons that we came up with this structure. We have before you a 5-year contract, again, subject to annual approvals. But the purpose of that is to build a good, strong program and a positive working relationship over the long term. The City Council had indicated initially, reach out to Arapahoe County. Maybe we should, use them as a stopgap and then hire our own person. But in the midst of these discussions, I think the structure that we've come up with makes more sense. No single individual that Englewood could hire would have the depth of experience, the support, expertise, equipment that the Office of Emergency Management could provide. The contract does provide for the city to support hiring one more person for their office, but that person is a dedicated Englewood liaison. And they're going to focus their time and their energy on helping Englewood develop the plans and respond to emergencies as appropriate. We would have to appoint, the city manager would have to appoint someone to be the designated point person for the City of Englewood. So there will be some staff time involved, but it would not be a full-time job, so we would not have to hire additional staff. We would work with our team to make sure that the communication is good and we're fulfilling our side of that bargain. The Englewood's monetary support is estimated, these are not final numbers, at about $113,000 a year, where I think that's pretty close. When we had talked about hiring a qualified individual, I think we would have to pay more than that, somewhere between at least $110,000 to $135,000 for one person who would then need additional support in order to do all of the many tasks that Nate has outlined for his office. So I think it would be a cost-effective solution for the city over the long run. And I think on an operational basis, the support of the Office of Emergency Management would be unparalleled. This office is one of the best in the state, if not the nation. Obviously very qualified. Nate is too shy about his own qualifications and the connections that this office has with federal, state, and regional agencies. And I think the emergency services of the City of Englewood would profit from that expertise. So what we're asking tonight is your guidance to pursue and finalize an IGA that is structured the way this one is, or fairly close to it, and then bring that forward as soon as possible for a vote of consideration of the whole council so that we can move forward and initiate the development of emergency services for the city.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Thanks for being here. It's very helpful. Council, questions, comments? Councilmember Cuesta.
Allow me to get to the portion of my notes. All right. Well, Mr. Fogg, thank you for joining us tonight. I appreciate it. And ICM Hargrove, I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I'm looking at component 3 of the Arapahoe County duties, and it's designate one qualified full-time employee to act as the primary liaison between City of Englewood and OEM. The liaison will be an employee of the OEM, but that's where we're covering that salary. That's somebody that would work in your office, Mr. Fogg, but Englewood would cover that salary, and that's where you just got to 110 to 135 for somebody that's qualified. Okay, very good. The second part of that then is, let's say we're able to reach terms and we go forward with a contract. Does that mean that we have to go through the hiring process before we start to get something in place, or would support be pretty active for us immediately after signing the contract, and then we're going to get that employee in place as quickly as we can?
I wouldn't wait for hiring. I have, like I said, I'm currently fully staffed, and it's amazing. So we wouldn't wait for that. That's the benefit to the city, I think, is you know, you do this on your own with one person, you have one person. You do this with us, then there's 6 when we hire this next one, right, or 7. So we would start right away.
Thank you. I've got a few other questions, but I know we're short on time, so I'll pass for now.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you. Thank you for putting all this together. I'm really glad we're finally at a place to start talking about this and the details. I had similar questions to Councilmember Quest, so thanks for asking those. But do other cities in Arapahoe County have a similar kind of agreement with the county?
Nope.
No,
This is
we would be the
groundbreaking.
first. Okay. Just curious. Okay, thank you.
Member Barentine.
I would like to get a little bit more information as well as we bring this forward. You said you have a lot of certifications, and no one person could have all the knowledge or experience. I mean, we've just recently been made aware that we actually do have some people who helped with the county plan here in-house that have quite a bit of knowledge and certification. As a matter of fact, they're on your list as participating in doing the county emergency plan. So I'm sure you're very familiar with both of them, the designated co-managers that worked on your plan. But you're scheduled to have your plan done again in 2020, so I want to know how that's going to affect this contract, since that's prior to the 2 years. If you have looked at the operation plan, the emergency operation plan that was drafted in 2015, it was part of a little close to about $1 million over a 4 or 5 year period, and was part of that money to go ahead and create that draft. It was never brought to council for whatever reason. It still exists. So will you be reviewing that to see whether there's still applicable pieces so that we can see whether that's a fit for our community or not? And then just a little curious if we could get some information on why it's double. Both the previous city manager in August said that this would cost us about $60,000, and we're at double now. So I'm just a little confused what information they were going off at the time. So just those three things. The certifications, are you going to review the draft the plan that we had completed in 2015? Because I don't want to waste all that money, and it is there. Maybe this council can take a look at that as well. And when will the new EOP, county EOP, be done? And who will be the team that's working on that for the 2020 redo, I guess you have in your plan?
I think I understand.
Okay.
Certifications, I'll address that, starting with myself. Post-certified, like I mentioned, I was a law enforcement officer, retired as a lieutenant in the sheriff's office after 18 years.
Could I ask one question?
Sure.
It wasn't my intention for you to give off a list of your qualifications, which I think are probably amazing and lengthy. What I would like is a list of what the qualifications are, the certifications that you have within your office, so that we can kind of compare. And then later, if we decide that we want to go with our own emergency manager, what similar kind of experience we might be looking for to equal that out. I will not remember all of your qualifications, which I'm sure are very impressive. I'm just looking for a list of what kind of
types.
Yeah,
Okay.
types, and so that we can at least have some comparison in the future. I am not doubting, I have read your plan, I am not doubting your qualifications or your level of expertise that the county has put forward. Thank you.
So one of the things that everyone that I hire, I ask for at an entry level is a certification, either as an associate or a certified emergency manager through the Colorado Emergency Management Association, of which I'm the vice president, or the IAEM, which is the International Association of Emergency Managers. Other certifications that we look for are in a variety of different planning. Ultimately, there's a list that I have.
Mr. Fogg, if you could send those along to us, that'll
Sure.
be part of our, because I bet they are vast. We have about 8 minutes left to, well, actually less than that, to finish up. So what we just need to do is see if we get all the questions collected here so that you all can continue to move forward if that's what we want. Councilmember Sierra is next.
Mr. Fogg, thank you very much for coming and providing us your process and your deliverables that we should expect to see from the city. I guess I just have a question regarding the equipment fee. Could you just talk a little bit about what goes into that equipment fee? And then secondary to that, just understanding if you foresee any additional technologies that we would have to purchase as a city, because we contract out with the City of Denver for fire, just any other additional costs that we may foresee that may not be part of this contract.
So fees are related to computers and radios for us. I have no more computers for staff, so we have to purchase computer software licensing and then an 800 megahertz digital trunk radio so that we can all talk. There's those fees. That's the equipment. And then additional, I don't anticipate any. I came up with more of a concern on my end, and that's regarding data sharing out of the other contracts, and we've addressed that on our Centennial side, and that doesn't exist in here yet, but we'll be sure to, that's that back and forth with the attorney side. But I don't see any additional costs that are jumping out at me right now.
Thank you. Councilmember Wink.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you very much for bringing this important presentation to us tonight. Certainly relevant and necessary and pressing, and what I'm most grateful for is the fact that through your process of communicating with OEM, Interim Manager Hargrove, you've discovered that our money can secure us far more protection now and in the midterm and long term for emergency situations. I mean, the city just doesn't function if we don't have these measures in place. And so I thank you for it. I would love to see us move forward with this, certainly. I'm sorry you have a summer cold. Those are the worst. But thank you for being here, and thank you for the information. I think our citizens are probably grateful to hear this, and to know that we can start now. There's no delay. We can actually start now and feel the protection and support of the county. So thank you.
Another question, and then let's
You
get a
bet.
sense if we're going to move forward. Member Cuesta.
You bet. It is brief. One of the components is provide and maintain a suitable vehicle for the OEM liaison. That would be a full-time vehicle dedicated to them.
Yes.
Do we have a surplus vehicle?
We do.
Thank you. And the next one is probably just a general question. We'll get the information further, but just the time frame going forward. It sounds like there's still some more negotiations to be completed, but what we'd be looking at to get something to that would come back in front of us. Thank you.
I would love to say that we could have something to you within a couple of weeks, but that may be optimistic on my part. I will pledge to do all I can to move it forward expeditiously if you want us to move in this direction.
Great.
And I can make the same.
Okay. Councilmember Berentine, and then we'll.
One quick question. I would like to see what it would be just to do the interim piece and the 5-year contract. We have a brand new city manager about ready to come on board, and who has a depth and breadth of experience with this that is impressive, probably just as impressive as your own. And I would like to make sure that they have an opportunity to weigh in this as well. But I don't want to delay having some kind of more official coverage, even though the county would have to cover us if something happened. I would like to have it be official that we had something. So even if we had some interim piece of that, what that would look like for the rest of this year, and then maybe looking at more a longer term contract effort or some additional information from our new city manager. So if we could bring both of those, that would be awesome.
Okay. I would like to weigh in. I am really pleased with how this has turned out. I don't know why it was quoted to $60,000 the last time, and a full-time person would have been way more than that, so it must have been a different service that we were looking at the time.
I think it had to do with benefits and a different level of managerial expertise.
I always thought it was a part-time position that we were asking for with that, but I
couldn't
don't
say.
know for sure. But regardless, the cost effectiveness of this and then the content kind of expertise and I think there is an unparalleled sort of wider network of amazing connections that you have that not one person would have. So I'd be totally for us getting this on we'll be doing it's an IGA, and a contract is just, it's not a first and second reading then, is it? Yeah, it's an
IG
ordinance. Okay, we
IGA's
will.
ordinance.
So I'd like to see us move this forward to first reading then. Anybody not in favor of that at this point? I mean, certainly they'll be answering questions that evening, but get it prepared to move it forward. We'll have a couple times to, and you have the questions that we had. Anybody want to weigh in on that negatively? No? Mayor Pro Tem?
Well, I guess the question that I have then is, there's still attorneys talking back and forth, and I'm not sure that, I do want to move forward with this. I want to be prepared to move forward, but I also agree with Councilmember Barentine that we have a new city manager coming on board, and who I want it set up so that we're ready to go. But if there is a different direction that the new city manager has or wants to add something to it, I think we need to take a little bit of time with that.
All right, anybody else want to slow down? Councilmember Sierra?
I was just going to mention, so it's just, we're going to structure these just like any other multi-year contract, so there basically is an opt-out after the first year, or maybe even after 6 months if it's the Jan 1 start date, but.
Usually 1 year, but.
Okay,
it's 1
so
year.
it does provide us at least an opportunity to bail out if we need it.
And I will say, it may not be in the interest of Arapahoe County to provide us any kind of short-term. I mean, what can they do? Mr. Fogg alluded to that, and I think it's an important consideration to keep in mind.
All right, great. Sounds like we should move it forward with sorting out the contract a little bit further with attorneys and then bring it back again for first reading.
Thank you.
If anybody has further questions that you think of in the next week, send them to Dorothy and make sure that we get those registered and figured out. Thank you, Mr. Fogg. All right, we're adjourned and move next door.